Hi, and welcome back to Manhattan's Renters Coaching Corner. Today we're going to cover requirements and documentation to sign a lease in Manhattan. Let's start off with saying that in Manhattan it may be very different than many other places around the country or around the world. We know of places that you simply approach the owner and you shake their hand, you smile, they look at you, you look at them, everybody's happy and you move in. In Manhattan the requirements are a little bit different and may require additional paperwork and not just a smile and a handshake. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the requirements and then get into some of the documentation that is needed. Requirements are very simple. The requirements are you have to have good credit or some credit, okay, and some credit or good credit is better than bad credit, and also income. With regards to income, income for a tenant needs to be anywhere between 40 to 50 times the monthly rent. So as the example, if you renting an apartment that is a $2,000 apartment, you would multiply the rent by 40 and that should be less than your annual income, or by 50, depends on the owner. Some management companies or owners have different requirements with regards to that calculation. So anywhere from 40 to 50 times the monthly rent and have good credit. Now, what happens if you, let's say a student, or you just starting a new job and you don't yet have the income, then you have the possibility to use what we would call a guarantor. A guarantor is somebody who would guarantee the apartment. In Manhattan, the guarantor requirements are obviously great credit or good credit. The next thing that we want to see is the guarantor needs to have anywhere between 80 to 100 times the monthly rent. So as you can see, that's actually double from what the tenant needs. And the logic behind that is very simple. The guarantor has their own personal expenses, plus they have the expenses of the apartment they're guaranteeing. Therefore, the qualification or requirements are double. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a second. Those qualifications requirements is what needs to happen. If for some reason any of those things are missing, if for instance there's no credit, or the credit is not very good, or the income doesn't work because the income is lower than the requirements, that doesn't mean still that you cannot get the apartment. It just means that you may have to work with different apartments or different owners that may accept your specific situation. Now, because of that, you have a broker that should know and will find out exactly which owners would work with us and which ones wouldn't work with us. In addition to that, very importantly, we need to make sure that we are ready if we have any of those situations or any of those requirements that are not 100% met. We need to make sure that we have other alternatives. One alternative is to offer the landlord to pay additional security. In Manhattan, the standard across the board rent and security are very simple. If your income is qualified and your credit is good, you will be paying in most cases 1 month's rent and 1 month's security. If any of those are not 100% at par, then you would have to pay additional security or more rent up front. So that's one of the ways to negate that and to find a solution to your specific circumstances. Okay, so those are the requirements in Manhattan to rent an apartment. Let's go ahead and talk right now about documentation. What are the documents that we need? We discussed that in some of the places around the world, you come, you have a smile, you shake the hand and you move in. In Manhattan, there is some paperwork required and it's pretty simple. In most cases, it's just a matter of having it handy for the time when the time is right. Because as you know, or you don't know, in Manhattan, apartments come and go very quickly, and you as a tenant and us as brokers want to make sure that you are ready to submit all the paperwork as soon as you find the apartment you want, so you can actually get the one that you choose that you want. It's very simple. Let's start off with the paperwork. First thing, well, let's use the two examples. One example is somebody who's employed, and one example is somebody who is self-employed. Let's cover the employed person first. Somebody who is employed, they have a job. Most landlords like to see that you have at least 2 years of history with this job or this industry or this company. If you have less, that again may be a reason for them to ask for more security or not look at as favorably at the application. But what paperwork they would need is very simply a letter of employment, and you may want to write this down. On the letter of employment, which should be produced on a letterhead of the company, you should have your name, the position that you hold in that company, your title, your annual compensation, including if there's any guaranteed bonus. Okay, and it's very important to put the word guaranteed bonus in the letter if it is guaranteed. Okay. Besides that letter of employment, we would also need 2 pay stubs, or the last 2 pay stubs that you receive from the company, and besides that, a bank statement and a photo ID. Okay, so for somebody who is employed, it's very simple. In most cases, we would need a letter of employment, 2 pay stubs, and a bank statement and a photo ID. Some landlords may also require the W-2 from last year, which is what you receive from the company for your tax reasons, and that's basically the requirements for a employed tenant. On the other hand, when we have somebody who's self-employed, there's still requirements to be able to get documentation to make sure the person is qualified. Now, as the employed person, you do not have a W-2, and you probably don't have an employment letter because you are self-employed. So in that case, what most landlords will want to see is the last year or 2 of tax returns, which the tax returns would show your income, obviously. Or in addition to that, or besides that, depends on the managing company, you may be able to arrange a letter from your CPA, your accountant, stating on the letterhead that your name, your position, how long you've been in the industry, and what your income is expected this year, or what your income was last year. All that on a letterhead from an accountant. Okay, that's to confirm that you have the income requirements to qualify for the apartment at hand. Besides that, the same as the employed person, we would need to see, or the landlord would need to see, a bank statement, photo ID, and to be able to get you qualified for the apartment. Okay, so let's just go ahead and recap on what the documentation we would need. Okay, employment letter, pay stubs, photo ID, and bank statements for somebody who is employed. Somebody who is self-employed, we would need either tax returns, CPA letter, bank statements, and photo ID. So really, it's just common sense. That's very simply just follow common sense. If you're employed, you have somebody else to provide you the documentation that you are currently employed. If you are self-employed, you would provide the documentation yourself to confirm that you are making this and this amount of income. That's the documentation required for renting an apartment. Now, what is the situation if you, let's say, are a student? You haven't got an income, you haven't yet filed any taxes yet, or you may have not got any kind of income to show, then you would possibly need what we would call a guarantor. Guarantor we mentioned before. A guarantor is somebody who is willing to guarantee the landlord that the rent will be paid on time, and if for some reason it will not be paid on time, the guarantor will pay the rent. So, first of all, in New York, in Manhattan, most guarantors and most companies prefer to have guarantors that are New York State guarantors, or at least United States guarantors. If you do not have a United States guarantor or a New York State guarantor, then you may want to tell that to the agent so they can find a owner that is more open to other options of guarantors from overseas, from Europe, from Asia, whatever the case is. So it's very important that the guarantor also is willing to provide the same documentation that the tenant provides. Okay, so the same requirements we just covered right now with the employment letter, pay stubs, bank statement, photo ID, or tax returns and CPA letter for self-employed people, that the guarantor understands that they will need to provide that to be able to be a guarantor for the tenant. Okay, that's the paperwork that would be needed. Besides that, we're going to cover in some of the other coaching corner recordings we have here with regards to the process of the application and what is required and the fees and all those things. So stay tuned, check out the other ones, and hope that helped, and have a great day.